My stepdad said, "You're not really family," until he needed a kidney, and I was the only match. The transplant coordinator closed the door behind us with that soft hospital click that somehow sounds louder than a slam, and my mom immediately grabbed my forearm like I was about to bolt. Her fingers were cold and damp. "Please," she whispered, eyes red and swollen, mascara smudged into two dark commas under each eye. "Just hear them out." Across the tiny consultation room, my stepdad's brother sat rigid in a plastic chair with his arms folded, jaw clenched like he was trying to bite through his own anger. My stepdad, Ron, was down the hall in a bed with tubes in his arms, and I could still hear the beeping from the monitors every time someone opened the door. The coordinator glanced at my chart, then looked up at me with a careful expression, like she'd learned to keep her face neutral when families were about to combust. "We have your results," she said. "You're compatible." For a second, my whole body went weightless like the air had been sucked out of the room. I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. I could smell antiseptic and old coffee. My mom made this broken sound, half sob, half relief, and squeezed my arm hard enough it hurt. "Thank God," she said, like I'd just been handed a miracle instead of a decision that could rearrange my entire life. Ron's brother exhaled sharply and muttered, "Finally," under his breath. And in my head, clear as if someone had played it through speakers, I heard Ron's voice from years ago, flat and dismissive. "You're not really family." I stared at the coordinator's hands folded neatly on the table and felt something hot crawl up my throat. Not gratitude, not pride, something uglier. Something like, of course it's me. It was a Tuesday night 10 years ago when Ron said it out loud for the first time. We were in the kitchen of the house my mom and Ron bought together, the one he called our home, but always corrected to my mortgage when he was mad. I'd just come back from my first semester at community college, exhausted and broke, carrying a duffel bag that smelled like stale laundry and cafeteria grease. I'd walked in and found my mom crying quietly at the counter because Ron had gone through her bank account again. I asked him, "Why are you treating her like this?" And he didn't even look up from the bills spread across the table. He just flicked his eyes toward me like I was a fly. "Stay out of it," he said. I told him I was her kid, and he laughed once, short, sharp. "You're not my kid," he said, "and you're not really family. You're baggage that came with her." I didn't say anything in that moment. I remember the way my mom's shoulders hunched, like she wanted to fold herself smaller to protect the peace. I remember the hum of the fridge and the sick little tick of the kitchen clock. I remember thinking, okay, so that's where I stand. And the messed up part is, he didn't only say it once. He said it in 100 different ways after that. Sometimes it was blunt, like that night. Sometimes it was a joke at dinner. Well, technically, she's not a real Harris, so everyone could laugh and pretend it wasn't cruel. Sometimes it was in the way he introduced me to people. "This is Emma, my wife's daughter. Not my stepdaughter. Not our kid." Like I was a neighbor who wandered into the frame by mistake. My mom met Ron when I was 14. My dad wasn't in the picture much. More like a once-in-a-while voice on the phone who promised he'd visit and then didn't. My mom worked 2 jobs and did her best, but we were the kind of household where you learn to read the mood the second the front door opens. Ron came in like a solution. He was stable. He had a steady job. He brought groceries without checking the price tags. He fixed the leak in our bathroom sink and said, "Don't worry, I've got it," in this confident voice that made my mom's face soften in a way I hadn't seen in years. At first, he was charming with me. He'd call me kiddo. He'd ask about school. He'd show up to one of my soccer games and clap too loud. My mom cried afterward because it felt like someone was finally choosing us. I wanted to believe it too. I wanted a family that wasn't always one missed paycheck away from panic. The shift happened slowly, which is why it took me longer than it should have to name it. Once Ron and my mom got married, the kiddo disappeared. The warmth turned into rules. The rules turned into control. He started commenting on how much I ate, how long my showers were, how loud I was when I came down the stairs. He complained about my school fees like he was paying them directly even when my mom did. He'd say, "In my house," like it was a stamp that made everything his. Then my mom had my little brother with him, Caleb. Ron became a different person with Caleb. Suddenly, he knew how to be gentle. Suddenly, he knew how to show up. Caleb was my son. Caleb was the future. Caleb got patience. I got tolerance. By the time I was 18, I was staying out of the house as much as possible. I worked shifts at a grocery store, studied at friends' places, took extra classes to finish early. Ron liked to tell people I was independent, like it was a compliment, but it felt more like exile. When I moved out at 19 into a cheap apartment with peeling linoleum, my mom hugged me too tight and whispered, "Don't be mad at him." Like my anger was the bigger problem. I try not to be mad. I try to be the bigger person. I did the family dinners. I showed up for Caleb's birthdays. I made polite conversation while Ron corrected my grammar or made little digs about my phase of trying to find myself. I watched my mom shrink around him over the years, watch her laugh too hard at his jokes, watch her check his face before she spoke. I kept telling myself, he's not my father. I don't need his approval. But the words still landed, each one a tiny bruise. So when the call came 2 months ago from my mom, voice shaking, telling me Ron's kidneys were failing and he was on the transplant list, my first feeling wasn't shock. It was this cold, practical dread, because I already knew what would come next. I knew exactly where this story would try to go. He needs a donor, my mom said. They said family is usually the best chance. I was quiet for a second. Okay, I said carefully. What about his family? My mom's breath hitched. They tested his sister. Not a match. His brother has health issues. Caleb is too young, and they said it's not. They don't want to. She cut herself off like she couldn't even say the sentence. I swallowed. So why are you calling me? Another pause. Then, smaller. Would you just get tested? Just to see. I remember standing in my kitchen with my phone pressed to my ear, staring at the dish rack like it was going to give me guidance. My body went hot. Not rage hot. More like being cornered. Mom, I said, you're asking me to get tested to donate an organ to a man who told me I wasn't family. He didn't mean it like that. She said instantly, reflexive, the way she always defended him. I actually laughed but came out bitter. How did he mean it? My mom started crying. Please, she said, please don't make me beg. And that phrase, don't make me beg, did something to me. Because she wasn't asking as my mother with authority. She was asking as someone trapped in a marriage with a man who had trained her to believe love is earned by sacrifice. And now she was trying to hand that training to me. I'll get tested, I heard myself say, but I'm not promising anything. My mom exhaled like she'd been drowning. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Emma. The testing process was weirdly clinical for something that felt so personal. You go into a bright building, answer 100 questions, pee in cups, get blood drawn, sit in waiting rooms with other people staring at their phones like they're trying not to think about what's at stake. The staff were kind but careful. They explained consent. They explained that it's voluntary and you can say no at any point. They explained that if you decide not to proceed, they can tell the recipient you were not medically able without revealing your choice, to protect you from pressure. That last part made my throat tighten. Protect you from pressure. Like they'd seen families do this, so often they'd built a whole system around it. I try not to think about it while I waited for results. I went to work. I did laundry. I scrolled mindlessly at night. But my brain kept jumping to old memories like it couldn't help itself. Ron at my high school graduation, smiling for photos and then saying, well, we got you through it, as if I was a project he tolerated. Ron telling my mom, in front of me, if she wants help, she can go ask her real father. Ron handing Caleb the last piece of cake and then telling me, you don't need it. Ron saying, you're not really family. And then the call came from the coordinator. It was a match. Not just a match, because of Ron's antibodies and whatever complicated medical stuff they explained in words I barely processed. I was basically the only viable match in the pool they tested so far. My mom cried so hard on the phone, I had to hold it away from my ear. Ron's brother texted me, thank you, like I'd already agreed to cut myself open. I didn't reply. Then we ended up here. The hospital, the tiny consultation room, the coordinator telling me I was compatible while my mom squeezed my arm like my body already belonged to the family plan. The coordinator cleared her throat gently. I want to be very clear, she said, eyes on me. Compatibility is just one piece. Donation is entirely your choice. You will have independent counseling. You can take time. You can say no. My mom's head snapped toward her. We don't need time, she said quickly, voice too bright. We're so grateful. Emma is just, she's in shock. I stared at my mom, and something in me hardened again. Mom, I said quietly, don't answer for me. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Ron's brother shifted in his chair and muttered, this isn't the time for family drama. Family drama. Like my body was an errand and my feelings were just noise in the way. The coordinator stood. I'm going to step out for a moment, she said, and when I come back, I'd like to speak with Emma alone. That's standard. Ron's brother's face tightened, but he didn't argue because the coordinator had that calm authority hospital people have. She left, and the door clicked shut again. My mom immediately turned to me, eyes desperate. Emma, she whispered, I know things weren't perfect, but he's still what? I asked softly. Still not my family? My mom's lips parted, then closed. Her eyes filled again. He's still your stepdad, she said, like the title itself should erase everything. I felt my chest ache, not because I wanted to punish anyone, because I was tired. You're asking me to save him, I said. Do you know what it feels like to be asked to save someone who never treated you like you mattered? My mom shook her head quickly. He's not a bad person, she insisted. He's from a different generation. He didn't know how to. He knew how to love Caleb. I cut in. My voice cracked, and I hated that it did. He knew how to be gentle with him. He knew how to show up for him. He knew. My mom's face crumpled. Please, she whispered again. If you don't do this, he will die. There it was. The emotional guillotine. Say yes, or you're the killer. That's how it felt in the room. I looked down at the table, at the little stack of pamphlets, at the pen, at my own hands. I tried to picture myself post-surgery, scarred, sore, having done this huge thing. I tried to picture Ron's face. Would he thank me? Would he feel shame? Would it matter? Or would it just become another story where I served the family and then got told to be quiet? The coordinator returned and opened the door. Emma, she said gently, can I speak with you alone now? My mom's fingers tightened again on my arm like she didn't want to let go. I pulled away carefully, not aggressively, but firmly. Mom, I said, I'll talk to you after. Her face looked like a child being left behind. In the private room, the coordinator asked me questions in that calm, structured way. Did I feel pressured? Did I feel safe? Did I understand risks generally? Did I want to proceed with further evaluation? Did I want them to tell the recipient I was a match? Did I want them to keep anything confidential? I stared at the wall for a long time before I answered. The wall had a poster about hand hygiene, smiling cartoon germs, like the universe was mocking me. I don't know, I admitted finally. I don't know what I want. That's a valid answer, the coordinator said. You don't have to decide today. I swallowed hard. If I say no, I asked, voice small, will they hate me? The coordinator's expression softened. Families react differently, she said carefully, but your autonomy matters, and your reasons matter. My reason is, he was cruel, I said, and the word felt too simple for a decade of tiny cuts. He told me I wasn't family. A lot. The coordinator nodded slowly, like she'd heard versions of that before. If you choose not to proceed, she said, we can communicate that you are not medically able, if you'd like. I felt my eyes sting. Not because I wanted to lie, but because I wanted an escape hatch. Can I think? I whispered. Of course, she said. We'll schedule counseling. We'll give you space. I walked out of the hospital into the parking lot, afterward feeling like my bones were full of sand. My phone blew up with messages from relatives I barely spoke to, prayers, guilt. Your only chance, God put you in this position. Do the right thing. One cousin sent a kidney emoji, like this was a group project. Ron's brother called and left a voicemail that started polite and ended sharp. Don't drag this out, Emma. People are waiting. I didn't call anyone back. I drove home and sat in my car in the dark, hands on the steering wheel, listening to my own breathing. My brain kept flipping between two images. Ron in a hospital bed, pale and weak, and Ron in our old kitchen, smirking as he told me I was baggage. I wanted to be the kind of person who could donate without resentment. I also wanted to be the kind of person who didn't betray herself to prove she was good. That week, I met with the independent donor advocate, another calm person with kind eyes who asked hard questions. She didn't try to sway me. She just kept pointing back to the same thing: consent, choice, boundaries, the right to say no, even if saying no made other people angry. Then, unexpectedly, Ron asked to see me. My mom called and said, "He wants to talk to you," like this was a peace offering. I almost didn't go. The idea of standing by his bed while everyone watched me like I was holding the remote control to his life made me feel sick. But something in me needed to see him, not the myth of him, not the pressure version, but the actual man. So I went. Ron looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. He was still broad-shouldered, even lying down, but smaller in the face, like illness had stripped away some of the arrogance. His skin was grayish. His eyes were tired. The room smelled like antiseptic and stale air. My mom sat beside him, holding his hand like it was a lifeline. When Ron saw me, he swallowed. My mom's eyes pleaded at me over the bed rail. "Please be kind." Ron cleared his throat. "Emma," he said, voice rough. I stood near the door. I didn't sit. "Ron," I said. He stared at the blanket for a moment, then said, "They told me you're a match." I didn't respond. Ron's jaw worked like he was chewing through pride. He paused. "I'm not good at this." "No," I said quietly. "You're not." My mom made a small reprimanding sound. "Emma." I held up a hand without looking at her. "Let him talk." Ron's eyes flicked to my mom, then back to me. "I know I said things," he began, and already it sounded like a minimization. "I know I wasn't always. You told me I wasn't really family," I said, and my voice was steady in a way that surprised me. "You said I was baggage." Ron flinched like the words were a slap back through time. His throat bobbed. "I was angry," he muttered. "You were cruel," I corrected. "Anger doesn't make you accidentally call a kid baggage." My mom's face tightened like she wanted to interrupt, but she didn't. For once, she didn't. Ron stared at me for a long moment. His eyes looked wet, but I couldn't tell if it was emotion or exhaustion. "I don't have an excuse," he said finally, and it came out almost resentful, like admitting it cost him something. I felt my chest tighten anyway. "Okay," I said. Ron swallowed again. "I was wrong," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. "You are family. You always were." The words landed heavy. Not because they healed anything instantly, but because I realized how long I'd wanted to hear them and how late they were arriving. My mom started crying softly, like this was the movie moment where everything turns around. Ron looked at me, eyes steady now, and said, "I'm not asking you to do it." I blinked. "You're not." He shook his head slowly. "If you do it," he said, voice rough, "I'll be grateful. But you don't owe me your body, and you don't owe me forgiveness." The room went quiet. I heard the monitor beep. I heard someone laugh faintly in the hallway. My hands were clenched at my sides, and I forced them to relax because my nails were biting into my palms. My mom's head snapped toward him. "Ron," she whispered, horrified, like he just turned down a winning lottery ticket. Ron didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on me. "I did enough taking," he said quietly. "I'm not," he swallowed. "I'm not going to take this too." I stood there, stunned, because I'd built this whole mental fortress against being pressured by him, and suddenly he was doing the one thing I didn't expect, leaving the choice with me. And now the choice was somehow even harder. I drove home that night with my hands shaking on the wheel. Because if Ron had stayed the same arrogant man, it would have been easier to say no. Anger is a clean fuel. It burns straight. But remorse, real remorse, is messy. It complicates everything. It makes you feel like a monster for still being hurt. Over the next 2 weeks, I thought about it constantly. Not in a dramatic, "I'm so noble" way. In a practical way. I read the consent forms. I ask questions. I talk to the advocate. I talk to my therapist, who kept repeating, "Whatever you choose, make sure you can live with it." That sentence haunted me more than any guilt text from relatives. Because I could live with saying no. I knew I could. I'd built a whole life out of living with unfairness. What I wasn't sure I could live with was saying yes for the wrong reason. In the end, the decision came down to one quiet moment. I was in my apartment, folding laundry, when my little brother Caleb called me. He's 19 now, voice deeper than mine, still trying to act tougher than he is. Hey, he said. Mom told me you might, you know. I sat on the edge of my bed with a clean towel on my lap. Yeah, I said. Caleb went quiet, then said, I'm sorry. I blinked. For what? For him, Caleb said, and his voice cracked. For how he treated you. I didn't see it when I was little. Or maybe I did, and he swallowed hard. You were always the one who left early. And I thought you just didn't like us. I closed my eyes. My throat tightened. I loved you. I whispered. I know, Caleb said quickly. I know now. And I am scared. His voice dropped. I don't want him to die. But I also don't want you to get hurt again. And everyone keeps acting like you're the solution, and it's not fair. I let out a shaky breath. No, I said. It's not. Caleb sniffed. If you say no, I won't hate you, he said. I swear. I needed you to hear that from someone. I sat there with the towel in my lap and felt something settle in me. Not an answer, exactly, more like permission to choose from my own center, not from fear of being hated. The next day, I called the coordinator and told her I would proceed with the next evaluation step. Not because Ron deserved it, not because my mom begged, not because I wanted to be a hero, because when I picture myself 10 years from now, I didn't want my life defined by his cruelty. I didn't want him to be the reason I withheld kindness. I wanted the decision to be mine, cleanly mine, even if it hurt. I also set boundaries so firm they made my voice shake when I said them. No family updates without my permission, no pressure visits, no making this a public prayer chain event. The hospital advocate backed me up. My mom cried and said I was being harsh. I told her, no, I'm being safe. The surgery happened months later. I'm not going to turn this into a medical drama, because it didn't feel dramatic in the moment. It felt surreal and quiet and terrifying. There was paperwork. There were nurses who joked gently. There was a cold operating room. There was waking up feeling like a truck had parked on my abdomen. There was pain that made me cry even though I hate crying in front of people. There was also a strange clarity. I had made a choice, and no one could rewrite the reason for it. Ron recovered. Slowly. He looked at me differently afterward. Not like he suddenly became a perfect person, but like he was aware, finally aware, of the weight of what I'd done. He thanked me once, quietly, when my mom wasn't in the room, and his voice shook. I don't know how to make up for it, he said. You can't, I told him honest. But you can stop pretending it didn't happen. He nodded. I will, he said. And for once, I believed him. The family fallout was weird. Some relatives treated me like a saint. I hated that more than being ignored. Some treated me like I'd simply done what was expected, which also made me want to scream. My mom tried to act like this had fixed everything, like donating a kidney could stitch a decade of emotional damage back into a neat family story. I didn't let her. Every time she got too glossy about it, I'd say, this doesn't erase the past, and she'd flinch, and then she'd nod like she was learning a new language. And Ron, he started saying, my daughter, when he introduced me. Not in a performative way, not loudly at gatherings, but casually like it was normal. The first time he did it, I felt my throat tighten so hard I had to look away. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like grief for how long it took. We're not suddenly a Hallmark family. I still carry scars that aren't just physical. I still get angry when I remember certain things. Sometimes Ron says something dismissive out of habit, and I feel my body tense like it used to. But now, when I call out, he doesn't laugh. He doesn't tell me I'm too sensitive. He looks ashamed. He apologizes. And my mom doesn't rush to smooth it anymore. She sits in the discomfort. She lets it be real. I don't know if donating made me forgive him. Forgiveness is a big word that feels too clean. What it did do is this. It took the power away from that sentence he used to throw at me like a weapon. You're not really family. He said it like it could define me. Turns out my body was the only match. But more than that, turns out I didn't need him to validate my place in the family to know what I was. I made a choice. I set terms. I kept myself. And the wildest part, the kidney didn't make me family. I already was. All it did was force everyone else, including Ron, to finally admit it out loud.